Hello, this is Professor Sultanat Liebert at VCU. Today's topic is planning the evaluation and engaging the stakeholders. Once an evaluator is brought in to evaluate a program, there are several steps that need to take place in the planning stage of the evaluation. The first step is deciding if the program is evaluable and whether it's the right time to evaluate. The second step is selecting the type of evaluation, formative evaluation or summative evaluation. You might remember that formative evaluation focuses on the ongoing program and is intended to provide feedback in order to improve the program. The summative evaluation is conducted on a program that's already been completed and is meant to render judgment on it. The third step is developing key research questions, which will determine which type of information to collect. The nature of the research questions will also determine selection of appropriate measures and research design. The selection of the research design is bounded by reality, however. If an evaluator is brought on board after the program has already been completed, there are limitations to what kind of research design she can pursue. For example, if the evaluation questions are best answered through the experimental design, but that design is not feasible because the program has already been completed, then the evaluator would need to select the next best method. The next stage in planning an evaluation is data collection. The type of data we collect depends on the research questions and the methodology we select. Appropriate data analysis strategy is determined by the methodology we select and the type of data we collect. The next step is writing the report in a way that is accessible and appealing to the target audience. For example, most evaluation reports are meant to be read by a wide range of stakeholders with the hope that the findings are practical and they help improve programs. Therefore, using highly academic and technical jargon in writing up the findings of the evaluation would not be appropriate. After the evaluation is completed, it is important to disseminate it to the appropriate audiences and promote its use. Gauging the evaluability of a program involves systematically examining the program both theoretically and based on data to determine whether a full evaluation is warranted. Evaluation assesses whether program theory has led to or is leading to expected outcomes. A program has to meet 4 criteria to be considered evaluable. The first one is that the program should be operating as intended. It should also be relatively stable, meaning that there have not been major changes to the program design or its implementation. We also need to ensure that the data necessary to properly evaluate a program can be obtained. And finally, the program should seem to be achieving the intended results. As an evaluator, how would you determine if the program seems to be achieving positive results? First step is you would subject program theory to logical examination. Are linkages between what the program does and what it hopes to achieve plausible? You could also consult staff, clients, funders, program participants to gather existing data to determine whether the program seems to be achieving the intended outcomes. Evaluability assessment can be a preliminary evaluation. If program theory and program data do not promise positive outcomes, the assessment can identify obstacles and logical incongruities. Identifying the key evaluation questions is the first task during the design phase of the evaluation. It seems like a straightforward task, but it could be often challenging because different stakeholders might want the evaluation to answer different questions. As any research project, an evaluation cannot answer all of the questions. It needs to be focused in order to be methodologically rigorous. Evaluation questions can focus on program process. What is taking place in the program? Is the program being implemented according to the program design? Evaluation questions can also focus on the program outcome, assessing if there has been a positive change in the client's or program participant's situation. Evaluation questions should focus on attributing outcomes to the program, answering the question, are the changes observed due to the intervention or due to some external circumstances? Evaluation questions can also focus on the link between processes and outcomes. In the example I used previously about reading interventions for elementary school-aged children, it would be important to know whether online reading platforms, as opposed to traditional books, lead to better or poorer outcomes, or whether small group tutoring in reading can be as effective as the more expensive one-on-one tutoring. Essentially, we are trying to figure out the optimal program design that leads to the desired outcomes. And finally, evaluation questions can also track program theory to explain why the outcomes came out the way they did. There are also other considerations that need to be taken into account in the evaluation planning stage. One is deciding whether the evaluation is going to be a short-term or a long-term study. Long-term studies are generally preferred for most programs because we want to know whether the outcomes that program participants experienced are sustained over time. However, long-term studies are more expensive, so the compromise might be to carry out a short-term study. It is also important for evaluators to investigate both intended and unintended consequences of the program. There are different channels of information an evaluator can use to find out what the unintended consequences might be. One is evaluators' knowledge and expertise. In many cases, evaluators who are brought in to evaluate a program have experience with similar programs, so they can anticipate potential unintended consequences. Another source of information about unintended consequences is program critics. Evaluators can also find out what the unintended consequences of specific programs might be by reading prior research and evaluation reports on similar programs. After specifying the evaluation questions, an evaluator needs to decide which methodology to use. Qualitative data collection is appropriate when key evaluation questions relate to program process and program is not well established yet. It might be new and it might be complex. Quantitative data collection is appropriate when key evaluation questions examine program outcomes as opposed to program implementation, and a program is clearly defined and has well-specified activities. Mixed method approach that uses both qualitative and quantitative methods is often optimal in program evaluation. This slide presents an example of an evaluation planning tool. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, which conducts a lot of evaluations, uses this matrix to plan an evaluation. The first column lists a few key evaluation questions. In the second column, they specify what information they would need to answer each question. In the third column, they write down how the information will be obtained methodologically. In the fourth column, they identify shortcomings of the methodological approach they selected. And in the last column, they will specify what the collected data will allow evaluators to say about the program. The next topic I'll address today is engaging stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders in a government or a nonprofit program? Stakeholders are individuals, groups, or organizations that can affect or are affected by the evaluation. The most important stakeholders are program beneficiaries. Program funders are also key stakeholders. Other stakeholders could include program staff, family members of program beneficiaries, as well as community members who might be affected by the program. Engagement of stakeholders has been shown to improve the design and implementation of the evaluation. In addition, when stakeholders are involved in the evaluation, they are more likely to use its findings to improve programs. Stakeholders could be a fairly broad group, so it's useful to specify who the primary intended users of an evaluation are. Primary intended users are key stakeholders who help the evaluator make decisions about key evaluation questions, about the research design, and they can help interpret the findings. How would an evaluator go about identifying evaluation stakeholders? This is a particularly important question for an evaluator who is not from within the organization and who is an outsider. One approach to identifying evaluation stakeholders is to assemble a small analysis group of well-informed participants who believe that a user-focused evaluation would be useful. This analysis group, assisted by a skilled group facilitator, would identify potential stakeholders. The analysis group and the evaluator would then identify what each stakeholder group would want to get out of the program. Then, an evaluator would need to identify what he or she would need from each stakeholder group to maximize the quality and utility of the program evaluation. When it comes to the analysis of stakeholders, there are typically 4 broad groups. This is an example of a typology that could be used to classify and rank stakeholders. Players are individuals with an interest in the program and significant power. They are often key stakeholders who are in a position to affect the use of the evaluation. Subjects are people with an interest in the program but little power, such as program participants. Context setters are individuals with significant power, but often with little direct interest. It might be important to get the buy-in of context setters because they might reduce barriers for evaluation by opening doors, or in contrast, they might create barriers by sheer lack of interest and support. The crowd includes people with little interest in the program and little power over the evaluation. These 4 typologies can help an evaluator rank stakeholders to determine how to engage them in an evaluation. This matrix offers a template for planning whether to and how to engage different types of stakeholders. The categories of engagement range from do not engage to collaborate and empower. The rows in this matrix indicate at which step of the evaluation the stakeholder involvement would be useful. Stakeholders can be involved in phases ranging from evaluation planning all the way to implementation and report dissemination. This is the end of the lecture on evaluation planning and stakeholder engagement. Thank you for listening and take care.